Lost Private. We're in Normandy.
Thanks for checking in here at the We're Not Lost Private podcast. We appreciate all your support. But do you know how else you can support us? By signing up at Patreon. For $3 a month, you'll have access to all of our episodes, plus access to all kinds of bonus material, like our quarterly newsletter, photographs and official paperwork, and research that goes into each and every show. You can follow the pod on a multitude of platforms such as YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, pretty much anywhere you catch your pods. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you soon.
Welcome, everyone, to episode 50 of the We're Not Lost Private podcast. Yeah, it's hard to believe it's number 50. When Leighton and I started this podcast in January of 2024, we never thought we'd get this far. Kind of figured it would be over before it started, depending on the audience. But 50, we've probably done more than 50, but that's the number that came up. And thankfully, number 50 is with someone who's been with us before in episode 32. Stephen McCloud is back to talk about NCO leadership in the Marine Corps during World War II. Now we're going to lean heavily on Stephen's excellent book, Black Dragon, and he's got some slides and some audio, which I think is a real treat to hear the information we're going to be imparting right from the mouths of the men who are there doing the job. Stephen, welcome back. It's great to have you.
Thanks, Joe. Great to be here. Appreciate the invitation, and it's an honor.
Yeah, and the genesis was this for this particular episode was our previous talk on Black Dragon, and it was great. We did a few text exchange, and I said, I really want to talk about guys like Sam Haddad, and you said this is music to my ears, and to me, and you said you were glad that I latched on to Sam and his story throughout the book. Because to me, he is the embodiment of quiet but effective leadership, and we can sit down and look at the leadership traits and do a very structured, analytic look at that. But I think a lot of times what gets overlooked is some of the intangibles of leadership, and I think that's what we're going to lean into heavily. And I'm going to promote Steve's company, Trident Leadership. They do a lot of great stuff. I'm going to have their link in the episode description so you can check it out. They lead tours, they do conferences, they do advisement on leadership, corporate leadership as well. I'm not going to steal your thunder in talking about your company, but we'll have a chance to talk about that so you can do a little self-promotion later on. But I think we owe it to the listeners and viewers to dive right into this bad boy.
Good.
So
yeah, music to my ears. Anytime anybody wants to hear about Sam Haddad.
Yeah. So what we're gonna do is Stephen's got some slides we're gonna put up, but again, it's got some audio and we're gonna talk through it. So if you're just listening to this, you're still gonna get a lot out of it. So please don't switch off if you think it's gonna be visual heavy. It will be, but we're gonna fill the gaps there for you. And we're also gonna talk about guys like Basilone. But when I do, I'm gonna talk about it from the viewpoint of Chuck Tatum. I had a lot of time to talk to Chuck before he passed away, during and post production of the Pacific. And he said, everybody wants to talk to me about Basilone, but you've asked me some questions that I don't normally get about him. So I really appreciated that coming from Chuck. I really liked talking with him. He's a very down-to-earth guy. And then I'm also going to talk about some RV Bergen. And so folks that are fans of the Pacific miniseries will get a little additional stuff out of this that you wouldn't get from the miniseries. I had known RV for quite some time, and he and I had talked extensively about leadership because he had a different leadership style than some of these other folks. But I'm going to turn it over to Stephen right now so we can crank up these slides and get to talk about Marine NCOs in combat during World War II in the Pacific. So,
great.
You want to kick us off?
Well, sure, and I'm probably going to come right back at you.
Okay.
Because let's just say I put together some slides that are designed to support what we're talking about. I don't want to talk about slides or pictures. Nobody does. But, you want to talk about, why is it that you want to talk about NCOs?
Oh, because simply stated, they are the backbone of the Marine Corps, especially in combat. These are the guys that fill the gap in leadership between officers and senior NCOs and the privates and nowadays lance corporals that have to do the heavy lifting. And to me, they are that connective tissue and leadership for the Marine Corps in particular. But I would broaden that to say throughout the United States Armed Forces, those NCOs are the ones, they're the doers. They execute and oversee the execution of orders.
There you go. Let's go ahead and this is all about leadership. Folks may not think that if we get obsessed with Easy Company 506 and all this kind of, that's great. But you know what made it work? I mean, that's what it's all about. And it's what, you can come up with plans, and anybody can sit around under a tent or in an office and come up with plans. But how are you going to make it work? That's your NCOs who get up there and get it done and hold it together, by the way, when it all hits the fan. So the answer to the question is, it is leadership. And when we're talking about NCOs and why they're there and what their value is, certainly the Marine Corps in World War II, it's leadership.
Yeah, without a doubt. And we'll see that later on when we talk about Sam and how he comes to the forefront after their platoon leader is killed, Duke, right? When Duke is killed.
Yeah. Drake. Yeah, Lieutenant
Drake. Sorry.
That's right. But that's exactly right. So and these guys have, and also let me premise, and I'll come at it from Fox Company, which certainly is World War II, which is total war, global war, total war, which impacts a lot of things, and the mindsets coming into things, how things are done, etc. There's that. And you've got the regular Marine Corps, and then you've got a whole lot of reservists who are coming in for the war, and they're not to be in the Marine Corps all their lives. And that also frames a mindset as well. And so there is that. But also, we should preface that when we're talking about Sam Haddad, we're talking about Fox Company 23rd Marines, which is 4th Marine Division, which doesn't show up into the Pacific until January 44, which is in the Central Pacific only. And it's purely offensive war. The 1st Marine Division, the 2nd Marine Division, 3rd, they have gotten the job done out of the defensive phase in that nasty, terrible period at Guadalcanal and thereafter. So 4th Marine Division is completely offensive in the Central Pacific. So those are also, which also means they've not learned those tough lessons yet about fighting the Japanese that the 1st Marine Division has. Now, some of the veterans and survivors of those campaigns, especially some with malaria, had been sent back to the States after Guadalcanal to be embedded with these forming up units in 42, mid 42 and later, and training them on some of the lessons learned and dispelling some of the mythology about fighting the Japanese and all of this kind of stuff. But to settle things down as well, say, here's what you're going to need discipline for and all that kind of stuff, and to shave off the edges of craziness of Boots and some of the gung-ho and the zealousness and all that kind of stuff. So but they have yet to experience it until they get out in the Pacific. So all of those things frame in the experience of the 4th Marine Division, so we should set that up as well.
Yeah, I'll pull a thread on that a little bit.
Cool.
So we're talking about like the attrition rates on the 1st and 2nd Marine Division in particular during that time frame from 42 on. You have Guadalcanal, you have Gloucester, you have Peleliu for the 1st Marine Division. Essentially, Peleliu destroys the 1st Marine Division. By that time, they're combat ineffective essentially when they come off the line. And then you have Tarawa and Beisho, which basically does almost the same thing to the 2nd Marine Division. So you really, and as you state, like a lot of the guys that survived, they did pull many of them, and that's Barcelona ends up being one of those. But his is a roundabout way of getting to the 5th Division. But like you said, the 4th, the 5th, these are all designed for offensive operations. We are now taking the fight to the Japanese, the inner ring of the Japanese defense perimeter, so to speak. And that's what they're designed for. And these guys they're there, like you said, to temper that excitement, exuberance, etc., of these new men who only know that they want to get in there and mix it up. That's a very good scene in the Pacific where the Barcelona character is talking to the 2 Marines, including one of them was supposed to be Tatum. and the platoon about how you look at the Japanese as fighters. And it is vital for them to understand that these guys are highly capable and well trained. Their infantry tactics are adapting, but their basic infantryman skills are excellent. Use of camouflage, the marksmanship, all those things are they're very good at, and that has to be respected.
Absolutely, got to be real life. You know, in Black Dragon, we talk about the company commander, who's later battalion exec, Jack Padley. When he's finally wounded and sent back to the States for a time, and he's in high demand to give talks here and there. And he's never been much of a talker, even from his days in college. He doesn't care much for interviews and all that, which we'll talk about later too. Most of what he's talking about is these folks are tough, and this thing about this is about over with, or they're done for. Forget it. Get it out of your minds.
Yeah, put it away, because they're definitely not. And we see that in Okinawa is like a huge wake up call in terms of how for the Army and the Marine Corps. And yes, I'm a proud Marine, but I'm not too proud to say that we know that the Army conducted more amphibious operations than the United States Marine Corps did during World War II, and actually had just as large a force out in the Pacific, if I remember correctly, as the Marine Corps did, if not larger.
Even larger. Yeah, they had a lot of divisions out there.
We had a really good PAO firm. It was taking care of our public relations for us. But
there's some sharp Army units out there, hard hitting.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. I mean, they take J. Lawton Collins, who fought on Guadalcanal with his division, and bring him back, and I believe he's a corps commander for Normandy at the time, and he moves all the way up the chain. I think he's commander of NATO at one point before he retires. I mean, J. Lawton Collins is a superstar as a commanding general. One more point I wanted to drag back out of your initial statement there was that nowadays we have all these professional development courses. Like when I went through Corporal's course, I went through the NCO Academy, I went through Staff NCO Academy. You're in the middle of war, you don't have a lot of time. That stuff you are learning on the fly. And a lot of these Marines that end up being NCOs learn it from watching their seniors and drawing out, hey, they might not sit there at the end of the day and go, wow, that was a really effective way. But they're learning and then doing, and how they're learning is they're observing that. I really respect that NCO. He's sharp, he knows his stuff, he takes care of his Marines and corpsmen, and if I have to be in that position, or they don't even think that, they just do it because they've seen it in action and they know what effective leadership looks like. And I think we're going to see that over time as we continue to talk about this.
How about we dive right in? So these guys arrive, their first operation begins the last day of January 44 in the Marshall Islands. That's for the 4th Marine Division. And it's a very short operation, mercifully for them. And relatively speaking, they take light casualties there. It's a great strategic move led by Nimitz to dive them in where it's lightly defended. What happens immediately thereafter? I mean, they get back to Maui. And now they've already started it, but the Marine Corps issues now a reorganization, the 100 series, F series, to create this 4-man fire team, whereas previously the squad had been the smallest unit in the Marine Corps. Why did they do this? Because they've been fighting at Guadalcanal and Gloucester and these other places throughout these first couple of years, and are deciding that that control of and leadership of a squad is too centralized. It's not flexible enough, and there's no way that commander or leader can be where he needs to be at the right time at the right place. And we need to establish this 4-man fire team and put 3 subordinate leaders beneath that squad leader, and those are going to be corporals. And it's for the 4th Marine Division, it's L Company 24th Marines that's been working on this back in the States before shipping out. And they want to call it a fire team. Well, in the 4th Marine Division, they had begun calling it a group, and they continued to call it a group for the rest of their lives. 4-man fire team. So that's great. That's a Marine and well, we'll say 3 Marines and a leader is the best way to put that, all built around that BAR. And 3 of those in a squad under a sergeant. Well, they've never done this before. So what are they doing in the spring of 1944? They are working on this and figuring out, number one, how to do it, and number two, how to get good at it before they go to their next operation in June of 44 out of Saipan. So these maneuvers, these small unit training evolutions that they're doing on Maui is all about that. And so I would imagine every single day it's that debrief thing of, okay, what are we learning here? And what did we see somebody do, and how can we implement that and embrace it? And fortunately, most of the guys who went to the Marshals came back with them onto Maui and are going to Saipan. So you've got a little more experience headed there, essentially the same group of guys going to Saipan. If we jump forward, and we all know that you've got Saipan, then Tinian right after that, which was most of them, few of them could even remember much of Tinian because they were so sick with dengue fever and everything else. Iwo Jima is their final operation. And what's interesting is when Iwo Jima really hits the fan, as it were, and you get to the northern part of Iwo Jima, and that ultimately disorienting terrain and challenging terrain, who's left? It's the NCOs who have been through the Marshalls and the Marianas. And they're the ones who can get stuff done and hold this together. And none of those guys are any of the replacement Marines that show up late in 44. These are all the veterans of those operations. So it is properly, it's the right place to look to see what's generating action in a place like Iwo Jima. We see all the big guns and the grand photographs and all that kind of stuff, and the planes strafing and all. That's great, but when you get in northern Iwo Jima, they can barely even get to the enemy with those things.
I think I was going, like we discussed offline before we went live. I was reading through excerpts from the Black Dragon again because to me it's a very engrossing book, and I had to go back, and there were so many things I was pulling out of it. And at one point late in the campaign, up in the northeastern side, I think side of the island, and this goes back to the reorganization into fire teams. Why it worked was, at one point they were in cover. They had been taking mortar or rocket fire, and I think it was second platoon, and you had guys who were a mere feet away from each other and couldn't see each other because of the terrain. This is the ultimate leadership challenge and it's a challenge every day for a leader, because you're constantly reacting to so many different things. Like, we like to boil it down to weather, enemy, terrain, time, right? That's the way the Marine Corps likes to say, okay, these are the things that influence the battlefield. You're constantly reacting to that, and then you have to have good terrain appreciation. We talked about this as well. The ability to understand the terrain and how it can work in your favor and work against you. I can say all those words, but when you're in the field and people are shooting at you and you have mere seconds to make decisions that may save or cost your Marines their lives, it is a very unforgiving environment. And I think, again, it's beautifully brought forward in Black Dragon. So I highly recommend everybody go and get it. But really, like you said, it's all these guys that have been around and been through multiple operations that are driving the train at this point. I like that you made a point to say, well, this replacement, like, these guys had not been around very long, but they had effective leadership, and it allowed them to be an effective team. I do want to go back before we kick off. One of my favorite stories, and we'll talk about, is the beer story. And we'll get to, there'll be some audio there that people will really enjoy. But when I talked to Chuck Tatum about Barcelona, I asked him about John's leadership in particular, and some of this was brought out in the miniseries and some of it wasn't. Like, Chuck stated directly that John did not like, first of all, they were not on speaking terms. Like, Chuck was a private in the PFC and he was a staff sergeant, going to be gunny. There is a huge chasm between those levels within the Marine Corps. But John could be familiar with you, but it would be on his terms. But he said he did not like idleness. Like, idleness, he felt like was wasted time. He wanted everything had a meaning or a focus. Every action you did was based on John's experience in combat. You can go to professional leadership schools. He was a professional leader. and he learned that, and John foot stomped this constantly with them, was attention to detail. Because attention to detail, if you have it, you'll always be well armed. If you don't, you'd be dead quick. So it was always about attention to detail, everything that he did. And Chuck said, I found this is inspirational leadership to me in a nutshell, is that Chuck said, I found myself not wanting to disappoint him.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, he didn't lead by fear. He led by respect, and he led by competence, and he led by his expectation that you would be the same in your job. And I think that was, I thought those were pretty amazing. I mean, they're common sense when you think about it, but it's pretty amazing when you think about this 19-year-old private versus this, this gunnery sergeant who has been awarded the Medal of Honor. And he felt very privileged to be able to engage with him in a professional way to learn the ins and outs. But he said everything that he learned was based on John's experiences in combat, and that he at the end of the day didn't want to disappoint him. And I feel like that is something that's also gets understated at times when we talk about leadership, inspirational leadership. Again, we talk about those intangibles. And I think that is something that can be brought forth from some of the Fox Company Marines as well, later on. But I know we definitely want to talk about that beer story, and there's plenty of others about Sam, and that I think we can logically fall into now if you got some stuff you want to.
Sure. Now everybody wants to get into some of the people. Let's frame this in so we're not just talking about a bunch of individual concepts here and there when they hit them. Mm-hmm. And if you give me a 30-second leadership deal here, and
no, go right ahead.
Hindsight, this is what we've learned from these guys, right? So when you look back, you can place things this way, and I'm going to assert that, why leadership exists is to create an environment where the right thing is going to happen the right way at the right time, regardless whose responsibility it is. We call that the team state. That's how we define team. A team is not a bunch of folks who go throw axes together and drink beer together. It is a state, and it's temporary, and it fluctuates. Leadership's involvement in that and role in that and the way to build it is to ask, what does that state require? And it requires two things at all times to exist. Coordination, proper coordination, and resolve, not trust and confidence. Those are subsets. Resolve, coordination is what are we supposed to be accomplishing? How can we? Do we have the capability? The resolve is the energy that says, by God, I'm getting it done, or by God, I'm not letting him down, or vice versa, right? Two Marines, I refuse to let down. That's also a very powerful source of resolve, but that's what creates the energy in the forward movement in chaotic and unpredictable environments, which is the nature of war. And we're going to see that, and we're going to hear it articulated from Haddad and others when we're talking about Iwo Jima and the beer story from First Sergeant Manovich, etc. But that's it. These guys exist, and the Marine Corps existed to create, and they reorganized the Marine Corps to create a scenario where the right thing can happen the right way at the right time, regardless whose responsibility it is. Now, up to the Marine Corps, the Commandant, Vandergrift, had done his job, and it comes on down. And now you've got to get the corporals squared away with this as well, the PFCs and privates. And all that training they're doing on Maui and everywhere else in combat lessons is developing muscle memory. And that attention to detail is so important because that's what you're developing. So when the unexpected happens, you've got that much more of an advantage that the right thing is going to respond to it the right way without having to stop to think or talk or do whatever, So it's in that realm. I wrote, it's in that line of thinking that I wrote the article, the Iwo Jima, the Battle for Coordination for the Marine Corps Gazette a year or two ago. That they, in the midst of battle, did only those things and kept only those things that contributed to that coordinated action and dispensed with everything else, including orthodoxy, doctrine, stuff, rules, whatever it might be. If it didn't contribute to coordination, then it contributes to chaos. Get it out of here. And during war, in World War II, total war, they kind of did the same thing just as a company. Those things that mattered most to coordination, great, get it done. Other stuff, if it doesn't contribute to that, get rid of it.
Yeah, allowed them to focus effort.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that becomes the mindset, so that we exist to make things happen, to get it done. It's just who we are in this team, this organization. And it doesn't matter who's got to get it done. It's got to get done. Did I follow the rules? You know, maybe in garrison we need to follow the rules, but right here, let's just get it done.
Yeah, you give them the parameters, right? You give them the left and right limits, but you allow them to develop the plan as long as they know. We talked about this as well. As long as they know the objective is, and they know the parameters, and they know whatever supporting elements are with them. That's where you let your small unit leaders go. You give them that latitude to do the things they need to do to win. And I think I'm going to carry this point to where we can listen to one of the Marines from F Company, in that the first thing in my mind that is important as a leader is to know the people you're leading. You don't have to know all the intimate details of their lives, but you need to know their tendencies, their capabilities, things of that nature that allow you to maximize their input to accomplishing the objective. And I think we talked about this, and you have some audio and video for us on that point. When you come into a new organization, you need to learn who you're leading very quickly. Does that tee that up, Bart?
Yeah, I'm going to tee it. Yeah, I know exactly where you're going. I'm trailing behind here. So,
no, it's quite all right.
I got you. Here we come. All right, let's do a share the screen thing and kick this off here, because this is a great one.
This is a great story, by the way. Everybody will enjoy this.
Now, let me preface this. This is Pete Benovich. Now, I've got him shown here as Battalion Sergeant Major Pete Benovich, and he served as first sergeant for Fox Company at Iwo Jima. I'll explain all that. By the time he was done and retired, he was a major years later. But Pete had been Battalion Sergeant Major for 3rd Battalion and 1st Battalion. He'd gone to Ralph Haas's outfit. Had a couple of weird incidences where the lieutenant colonel had to, okay, Pete, you had the Jeep checked out and let somebody else drive and it got wrecked. And this is 2 things. So, and you were late to, okay, so I got to do something. So they busted him down to 1st sergeant. And since they needed a battalion sergeant major, they took Fox Company's 1st sergeant and they switched. So Jim Hudson went to 1st Battalion and Pete came to Fox Company in December of 44, a couple of weeks before they get on ships and sail for Iwo Jima. So he has had no time to get to know his NCOs.
Talk about a tough situation to put somebody in.
Sure. So he's going to lean heavily on. And by the way, let's just paint this picture. Now, this is post Marianas. If you want the why, months after the 4th Marine Division returns from Saipan and Tinian, they're still at roughly 60% strength. They don't know where all their guys are. A lot of the hospital ships skedaddled, and they didn't know if are they in the hospitals in the Pacific? Are they coming back? Are they gone? Are they transferred out? We get a train anyway. And then in October 44, remember at the end of December, they start getting on ships for Iwo Jima. So late in October 44, Fox Company's commander, Jack Padley, is promoted up to battalion. Larry Snowden comes in from 3rd Battalion to take command of Fox Company. The guy who's now going to be their executive officer just returns magically from a hospital in Guadalcanal, Charlie Ahern. And now you've got a new 1st sergeant as well. So your company commander, your 1st sergeant, fortunately the gunny is still there, Harold Douglas. And now he would have been up for 1st sergeant, but the battalion commander, Bob Davidson, asked him, hey, Pete's been around for a while and this is temporary. Do you mind if I give him the job of 1st sergeant? And Gunny Douglas was more than happy to do that because he didn't want to do all that paperwork stuff.
I understand completely.
He didn't want that job anyway. So Pete comes in as Fox Company's 1st sergeant, and they start boarding ships. And he's got to figure out a way to get to know his NCOs. And what he does is quietly, when they're in the Honolulu area, he gets somebody to help him, and they go buy a bunch of beer. And he loads up at least one his sea bag, brings it on the ship, on the LST. And the steward, he probably worked a deal with him, what's in it for him. But the steward stored it for him in the chilled kitchen, you might say, in the galley, so it would stay cold. And once they got to sea, Pete would slip into the galley with his wash pail, like he's going to do laundry, and he would load it up with beer, and he'd cover it up with a towel and come back through the troop spaces. And, time to go do laundry, he said. And he would invite his NCOs up on the fantail below the 40 millimeter, and they would sit around and talk and drink beer on the ship on the way to Iwo Jima.
So just for our folks who are not inculcated to Army, to Marine Corps and Navy lingo, first of all, a sea bag would be a duffel bag for you. The bucket is interesting because the Marines used to get what was called a bucket issue, and it included this would go at the bottom of your sea bag, and everything, including your rifle, would go in your sea bag, and the bucket formed the basis of this. So every Marine had a wash pail at least one point when they were issued in the Marine Corps, including heavy scrub brushes and things of that nature, because you were expected to not only be able to clean your own stuff, but clean everything around you. But that was part of your bucket issue. So, I mean, when you said he got his bucket, and I started laughing because I knew what a bucket issue is. But again, this is just a great just a hat tip to the old Corps. From a newer Marine. I'm retired now, but it's something you can definitely appreciate if you've been in the sea service before.
Well, you can imagine these guys sitting back there under the 40 mil on the ship, just talking, and having a beer. And I'm sure they didn't tell anybody, not enough beer to go around, but they certainly enjoyed this. I asked him, what happened when the beer ran out? And what do you think, Joe, happened when the beer ran out?
A lot of sad Marines.
Probably
or get more beer. Go get more beer.
Well, but they kept right on meeting.
Yeah.
And getting together under the 40 millimeter on the fantail on the way to Iwo Jima. What's in it for them? This is one of the big leadership questions. My old friend Gordon Bethune at Continental Airlines, it says they don't care who you are. You're the CEO. Big deal. What's in it for them? Seriously, if he bought this big lake that was stocked with fish. He posts a new sign that says, under new ownership, Gordon Bethune, no fish came to the party. He realized, I might actually have to put some bait on the end of the hook. And I might actually have to get in a boat and go out where they are. Well, that's what Pete was doing. And asking what's in it for them to do this. It's not just about him. He could order them to report up to him and come in to sit with him, wherever, and he could grill them and all that kind of. That's not what you learn. That's not where you learn your NCOs. That comes from time in the field, shared time together, and all those types of things. And they have no such shared experience. And this was his solution. Rules be daggum. He's not concerned about rules and regulations. We're going to combat it.
And being it's an informal meeting and there's beer, tongues will get loosened and he'll be able to get the skinny for sure.
Absolutely. So, all right. So, in whatever year it was, 2015, I sat down with Pete up at his house in Dover, Delaware, and we talked about many things. But we were talking about this very subject, and that's when this came up. And let me know, Joe, if this doesn't play out.
This is the reason I concocted the idea of the beer, because how else could I get them together? They were on their own time, and they didn't have to come up. If I said, let's go up on a fantail and talk, well, a guy could say, well, I got to do laundry, or I got to do this. But I said, the beer was the enticer, and it worked. Everybody likes a beer. So that paid off. I thought it paid off. It'd be interesting to me what some of those NCOs thought of that. I don't know, because I didn't tell them what my motive was. I just went, and it didn't make it look like a social gathering. But in my talking and my conversations out, I was bringing some of their feelings out in what they said.
Oh, what a treat that was.
Well, what's he really doing there? He's finding out how these guys think, how they react, what their motivations are, the
What makes them
personal
tick.
elements of leadership, right? So this is the implicit understanding of each other that matters so much, not just about rank and orders. And that's one of the big things, Joe. I know you got plenty to say about that, but when we're talking about NCOs and getting things done on the battlefield, that's last resort stuff. If you're talking about rank and this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, that's really your rank is obviously it's not something you need to foot stomp. I always found that ineffective leaders are the ones that have to foot stomp their rank or their position. They understand it. It's intuitive. It's on your uniform. You don't need to sit there and beat people around the head. To me, this is I would consider this, even though they are rapidly approaching combat, that is like a first step item, what Pete just talked about, and like sitting there and understanding what makes your NCOs tick, because these are the guys that are going to execute the orders. They're going to take their fire teams and squads and platoons out and move them out into enemy fire. And to understand your men, and like you said, what he said, like their concerns, the things that they think about, it allows you to help allay fear, because you can go and talk to them and say, well, I'm worried because the last time we were out, we took friendly fire from the artillery bubbas. And then you can say, well, we have a fire control party that is there to assist us and ensure that we get the rounds on target. I mean, it allows you to sit there and, like you said, and Pete said, you hear their concerns. And what that does is allow you to fortify them as leaders. And it allows them to be more effective on the battlefield. And again, I absolutely love hearing it from you and I can sit here and talk about it in theoretics all we like. But once you hear the men that put it in practice, especially on one of the most unforgiving battlefields that American forces have ever fought on, to me, that's the real gold here in hearing that. But yeah, it is understanding the people that you are leading is a huge portion of leadership. And again, we talked about this a little bit. It allows you to put them in positions for success. Like, okay, this guy is a strong, dynamic leader. I can do this with him. He's really good with supporting arms. This one over here, he's good at fire and maneuver. This guy will be my assault element leader, et cetera. I mean, it allows you to understand them, what makes them tick, and then what their capabilities are, and then how to best utilize it to accomplish the mission, which, by the way, the faster you do it, less casualties you're going to incur. The guys will be much happier that way. They know you're not throwing them away needlessly because you don't know what you're doing. So, I mean, all this stuff stems, though, from knowing your Marines or knowing your troops. And Pete's story just shows you, I mean, I listen to one that like that, interview of him saying that. And right away, I am confident in his leadership capabilities. I mean, he's obviously a survivor and he survived all these campaigns. But I mean, to me, I didn't have to know him from Adam. And I can listen to that and I'm going, this guy is probably a pretty good leader.
Yeah. I just react to it that way as well. Okay, I love this guy. This guy is not about playing games, not about him. He's not a rule follower. He's not about checking boxes. He's about making sure we're squared away so we can get it done on the battlefield. I like this dude. Yeah.
It's such a common sense approach on how to do it too. Like, he took what he had and he made it work to get what he needed. And I'm not saying he did that to manipulate them, although that is part of what's going on here. Like, he's forcing their conduct because he knows Marines like to drink beer, and we don't get much beer when we're on ship. Like, I don't know what the rules were back then, but it's 90 days on ship before you're allowed to have a beer if you don't work call between 9 days. So like, like he used the tools he had, like, and it was obviously a very concerted effort in his mind because I got to go out and get beer. Then I got to talk to the mess chief so I can make sure I can get this stuff kept in the cooler. And then I got to smuggle it out. Like, there's a very, very well crafted plan here, but I'm sure, I mean, that just shows you what kind of effective leader, because he's constantly thinking, here's my objective and here's how I'm going to execute the plan to do it. And if you have that kind of mentality when you're not getting shot out, your odds are you're probably still going to have that when people are shooting at you. Right? So that was just a great little piece. But I think if we back this up, one of the things that you talked about was on EWO, the bulk of the leaders, especially in the NCO cadre, were with the unit for a very, very long time for Fox Company. And I think that's something we ought to talk about because, again, there were no leadership schools per se back then, not like there are now for the Marine Corps. These guys aren't cookie cuttered, right? They have their own leadership traits that there's some uniformity there. There's a thread that carries on through their leadership. But they are learning on the fly, and it starts very early. As I think this is a nice way we can kind of dovetail into Sam's story, if you want to take it and run, take the football and run.
You know, you mentioned, and while I'm going to lead into that as a story, so we have some background and understanding of the impact of what we're going to eventually hear here in a few minutes. But you mentioned what we would call the culture kind of a unit, which there always are cultures, and they still are. And what's fascinating to me in the 23rd Marines at the regimental level, General Snowden and I, he was Fox Company's commander for a time. This guy retires after 37 and a half years as assistant commandant, Marine Corps. And we were discussing leadership, and he said when he first arrived at Camp Lejeune, which it was by the time he arrived, and the battalion commander called he and the other 3 brand new green lieutenants into his office. And in short, amongst other things, said, I'm going to tell you what your first responsibility is. And your first responsibility is you're going to be the mama and the papa for your Marines. And Larry says, you can imagine what was going through our minds when he said that. He said, that's exactly what you're going to do. And then he pulled out the little green notebook, the platoon leader's notebook. In this notebook, you are to record the names of the family members of your Marines. And when I come around to inspect the battalion, I'm going to check your green notebook and see what you've done with it. Because what gets measured gets done. For those leadership things. Why is that? And that's just the nominal portion of it. But knowing, if you listen, if you want to do business with the Japanese today, you better get to know the Japanese and understand how to do business with them. If you've got to do business with your Marines, you better get to know your Marines. And all of them. You can say should, would, could, ought to, supposed to, all that. You can say that till you're blue in the face. But if you don't know how to motivate them and what motivates them or demotivates them, you're not going to be effective. And what's Pete measuring? Hey, the company is going to suffer, and therefore the division is going to suffer if we go to Iwo Jima like this, where the first sergeant doesn't know his NCOs. We can't let that happen. And yet, dignity and respect, what's in it for them? And the best way to do this is not in a formal way, but in a personal way, so that we can get together and get to know each other and build those relationships. And by God, he's going to get it done. And that's what he did. And that
sorry, I just want to foot stomp that too. What the general said about the platoon leader's notebook, that stuff still goes on. Like when I became a fire team leader for the first time in 1993, my company gunny took me down to supply. I was issued a squad leader's notebook, the little green monsters, which I still have a stack of them in my house from my time in. And the first thing he did was, you will record the name, next of kin, rifle serial number for every Marine that you were in charge of. And I continued to do that all the way through my career, up until the point where I was a company gunnery sergeant. The pages got longer and longer and longer as you get more. Yeah. But that building block of know your Marines,
Joe,
that practice still exists today.
And one of the things it really does, maybe, I don't know, you're getting no facts and figures about your Marines, and that sometimes, that pays off. And it did on EWO. There's an occasion there. But the other thing is it reinforces the mindset that leadership is not about you. And that's the last thing that the colonel said to Larry and the other lieutenants as they were leaving. One more thing, Marines, lieutenants, these young Marines are not here to serve you. You're here to serve
them.
And it's a reinforcement of that it's not about me, it's about them. And I've got to maintain that focus forward on what they require in order to get the job done. Now, a real quick story from late 42 in Camp Lejeune, Fox Company in its early days, and maybe 75 Marines in the company, and a brand new green second lieutenant comes down, Henry Van Joslin, and he's running the company for a time there. The later company gunny told me this story. And he said, we're out there in the field doing the maneuvers all day, and then we're sitting down in the dirt for the sort of the lecture at the end of the day. And they had at this time a 40-year-old gunnery sergeant who'd been in forever, went in 1919, named Gallagher, and he's sitting over there in the dirt. But Lieutenant Van Joslin gets so far into his lecture, and he stops and turns to the gunny, says, "Gunny, you're going to have to come up here and finish this. That's all they taught me at Quantico." And he went and sat down. I've asked people, "What do you think about that? What do you think about this lieutenant?" And I've had people say, "Well, I don't think he knows his job." And I keep asking, and somebody hopefully says, "Man, I'll go to war with this guy because it's not about him. He knows what the company needs, and he's going to do what's necessary to make sure the company gets it." And
He was smart enough to know his own limitations
get the
and
heck
then
out of the way.
look for the man that could fill the gap and brought him up there. And that is very tough to do, especially for a new lieutenant to get up there in front of his Marines and say, "I don't know the answer." That is very tough because you're supposed to be the adult in the room. So kudos to him for that. I mean, that is a very tough thing to do. But like you said, half of the Marines will look at it and laugh at him, saying, just another dumb boot lieutenant. And the other half will go, well, at least he was smart enough to say, "I don't know the answer, but I'm going to get somebody who does." And generally, the guys that are going to say that latter part of that are probably the guys that have been around a little bit longer, probably your NCOs that are like, "Hey, at least he's not going to make a stupid decision that it's going to get me killed."
That's it. It's not about him. He's not going to send us places we don't need to be to make himself look good. It's not, there's no ego in the way of getting the job done here. So that was another one of these lessons. Oh, and to capstone the story I was telling about the colonel and then Second Lieutenant Snowden saying, "You're going to be the mom and the papa." Years later, when I'm working on the book, the daughter of one of the regimental officers, the captain, she was describing sitting down with her dad at some point, and I asked if they had recorded anything, and they took notes. And he talked about, "You've got to be the mama and the papa for your Marines." I said, "I know this terminology.
I've heard this
Marines.
before.
This is going out through the regiment. We've got evidence that this has become cultural."
Yeah.
And
I love that you called it Lejeune, by the way. Those of us who've been around that place for quite some time, you tend to slide into calling it Lejeune, even though there's no R in there anywhere.
Yeah.
It is very much a localized thing for people who spent time at Camp Swampy or know lots of people who spent time at Camp Swampy. So,
Oh, listen, I've been schooled up on that account. Let me tell you. So let's jump to someone else we want to talk about, and this is Sam Haddad. When I first arrived in the mid-90s at a reunion with Fox Company guys, interestingly, the first thing I heard was, "It's too bad you didn't get to meet Doc Bankin." Not even a Marine. He's one of the corpsmen. Now, I knew what corpsmen were, and I knew they were highly valued, and I bet he must have been really smart or something. That's the way I thought about it at first. I had no idea. But years later, as one of the guys, when I mentioned that name, one of the other guys said, "Probably the most important guy in the company, the Navy corpsman." That's odd, isn't it? The other
not at
name,
all. Not at all to me.
really, it just blew my mind. But what do you know? I didn't know that much. Knew nominally what I'd read, but the other name was, "It's too bad Sam's not here this year." Sam had not made that reunion. Sam had. And so they talked about him, and I knew, I started to learn about him. He showed up the next year, and that's when I first met him. I was very slow about working my way over and sitting with him and all this. But they referred to him as the gentle giant. And I heard a lot about him and about his leadership before I ever met him. And so I really was the boot from then on, and he really was the gentle giant. And very gentle about schooling me up as well. And when I learned to listen to what he was saying, the lessons were incredible, and they were written out now in the Marine Corps Doctrine, what he was telling me. So we're going to talk about him, and in order to do that, I want to start kind of from the beginning. And here's what I want to say about this. You know, when these guys joined up, Fox Company's formed officially in July of 1942 at what was Camp New River, North Carolina at the time, before it was renamed Lejeune. But these are really kids coming out of high school, and they get to play Army. I mean, really, right? And look at these, you know, they're just kids, high school kids, and they're being trained up. And it's not too long later, if we look at the guy on the right here, and here he is again on the left, and then on the right in the center. This guy he's known as Moose Kelly, Platoon Sergeant Leo Kelly. Didn't survive the war. Perhaps the most respected guy in Fox Company. Everybody revered him, including Sam Haddad and all the other guys. There's a growing experience here, maturing experience that a year of combat certainly does for you as well. He could be pretty sharp. He was out in North Carolina, pretty tough New York, tough fella. Most of the guys thought he was going to be playing for the Yankees before long. He was a big baseball player, big dude. And then now we see him at the far left there, you know, looking pretty salty. Haddad is standing next to him, the big tall guy with his hands in his pockets, which they seem to enjoy doing in these photographs.
It's a bit of a silent resistance
to
the rules.
It's exactly right. And that's
Air Force gloves.
And Coach Bercheski, they called him Coach. He loved coaching the teams down there. Was killed on Iwo Jima as well. But Sam's a big, tall fellow, lean. He was out of Pittsburgh. He's born in 1921, so he's one of the older guys.
Lebanese American.
Sorry, yeah,
Lebanese American.
His father had immigrated, I think, in 1907 from Syria.
Oh, Syrian. Okay,
Syrian,
I thought he was Lebanese for some reason.
Yeah, Syrian, and so he'd worked at the Pennsylvania Railroad, etc. He was tough hombre, super nice fellow. And then we see some of the other NCOs as well. He's on the right picture. He's got his hands around Little Sam. He was Big Sam, and that's Little Sam Lapika as well. And then some of the other NCOs here in the photos they took as well. Big Sam in the back. And I'm not going to talk about all the fellows right now. I'm going to get to the point here. Let's jump up a slide or two. So this is in the winter at Camp Lejeune. You see Sam back there. At that time, he's with the machine gun platoon. This is when there is a weapons company. So H Company will eventually, after the Marshals, be eliminated. And all those guys are coming into Fox Company. And Sam would move into the rifle squads. But he's just a private like everybody else. In fact, let's see, right before they sail out to the Pacific, he's promoted to corporal. And he's a corporal all the way through the Saipan operation with 3rd Platoon. Notice the terrain. This is Saipan. This is actually on the 2nd of July, 1944. The 4th Marine Division has been on the east coast of Saipan, waiting for the 27th Infantry Division on its left to level up the lines, work its way through Death Valley, so that the Corps can continue to move to the north. And so on the 2nd of July, they push inland from the east coast. Saipan angles to the right from then on. So they're cutting across the island. And
I think one of the things we talked about was the terrain appreciation is a key component of the small unit leader. You had to be able to understand how the folds in the terrain can work in your favor or work against you. And I think this is a great shot in seeing, and that's Sam over on the right, the tall Marine at the right, correct?
Big Sam up front, Little Sam right there with him, Sam Lapika. And if you might be able to pick up the tanks on the road, the winding road behind him, coming in through Talafofo. And they do run into a big roadblock, kind of an ambush set up by the Japanese on that day as well. But Bob Cook snapped this photo of Haddad. Notice that terrain, because Sam, we're going to hear from him in a minute, And he's going to talk about this and contrast some of this to Iwo Jima. One of the reasons I wanted to bring that photograph up. He on Iwo Jima in the northern part of it is right before they sail for Iwo, he's promoted to platoon sergeant. He is serving in the 3rd platoon as platoon guide alongside the platoon's platoon sergeant, but he's got the rank of platoon sergeant. And then he is sent to 2nd platoon after Lieutenant Drake is killed on the 6th of March, and he takes over, and he gets a field commission to 2nd lieutenant. Yeah, we can see this after Iwo Jima. You see his lieutenant's bar there and this Bronze Star that he gets for Iwo as well.
Yeah.
Now,
Notice the the Marine Corps has been notoriously stingy about the awards. Notice he has a Purple Heart, his Bronze Star that he's just issued. That's a puck. That's a Navy Marine Corps Presidential Unit Citation with a Star for 2nd award, and then his Asia Pacific campaign ribbon with 3 stars. That's it. Like, my grandfather came back from the Pacific. No personal awards, but he had Asia Pacific campaign ribbon with a Silver Star indicating 5 campaigns and 2 more stars to go with it. The Navy and the Marine Corps was very stingy back then. Less so now, but still stingy. But it's just amazing to see somebody like Sam, who had been in all those campaigns, and that's the limit of his awards, essentially.
Whole discussion there that's incredible, and we could get into as well. The other element is, in the rocky terrain of Iwo Jima, I'm not going to show photos of all this kind of stuff, but you get into northern Iwo Jima, and as Joe, you referenced earlier, and Sam talks about it, but you were in terrain that could only accommodate 1, 2, 3 guys at a time. When you're on the attack, there are open areas, but the Japanese weapons are not in the open areas. They're in that rocky jungle, and you have to go in there and get them, and nothing else can get in there with you. And the largest groups of Marines that could fit in there in many cases were 2, 3 Marines.
Fire team, fire group.
Absolutely, at most. And it doesn't look at all like Saipan. How's that going to work? But the fact of life is also now there's no officers in there to see what you're doing, as Sam had at, to win any awards or be awarded any awards. That kind of, there's just nobody up there. There's not even any photographers on that terrain.
There's nobody left to write up the award citations.
Nobody there to see it. That's right. And talk about Doc Bankin, the corpsman. By gosh, it's unbelievable. And General Snowden, as you and I were talking earlier, when he read all this, he was appalled. He said, I had no idea all this had happened in what these guys were doing up there. Or that he would probably been wearing a little more metal than he was wearing in that photograph right there, and rightfully so. But Marines, they kind of took pride in that as well. Yeah, well, we don't hand out a bunch of Marines, a bunch of medals. Before I switch to the next slide, because we're going to play some audio, and I think it's going to autoplay. In 1999, I think it was, possibly 2000, at a reunion, Sam and I knew we needed to sit down with the recorder. I had a Tascam recorder, and I said, Sam, we need to sit down and record a conversation. Now, he was suffering with diabetes, so he traveled down there. He'd set up his dialysis 3 days a week for 4 hours at a time. He said, let's do it Thursday night. Well, that's okay. Unfortunately, Thursday night's the night we have our business meeting, and we cut the big cake, and he does dialysis that day, and oh my gosh, he's going to be exhausted. And I must tell you, that night is probably at 9 o'clock that night. I'm not going to say a word. And everybody's starting to leave the business meeting that night. I'm not going to say anything. Sam's still in this corner seat over there, and everybody heads out the room, and he says, McCloud, are you ready? I said, yes, I am. And I was. I had my stuff ready to go. And we sat there for another 2 hours. And talked and recorded it. And we'd talked about all this stuff before, but I needed him to go through it. So I asked him in this series, okay, Sam, talk to me a little bit about the job of, let's say, platoon sergeant. What's it like in a platoon? How's it go? What's your job? Knowing we were going to go after that. And so the second slide I'll share with you is, okay, when you get to Iwo Jima, how's that work, right? And describe for us, I think in the third audio file you'll hear, he describes the terrain in Iwo Jima and the environment in which he had to get his job done. His job doesn't change. How he had to get it done does change. So let's share some audio here.
In the platoon, we have normally a second lieutenant and sometimes a first lieutenant. But my job was to keep after my men, to see that they didn't do something crazy. In an attack, you want to be sure that all of your guns or all of your men are in the proper places. You don't want somebody firing behind the regular line that was making the advance. You know, you're more in control. You're not using your own weapon itself. You're not using that. Your job is to make sure that everybody else is using their weapons and properly. And that there's no chance of, say, someone in the back firing and hitting some of his own men. So that's happened a couple of times on Saipan. We had a BAR man who had a tendency to fall back as we were advancing. I'd have to go to him and say, listen, you want to fire that gun? You move up front. You don't want to fire it? Stay back here. That's your choice, but you're not firing from back here.
So a couple of things to unpack real quickly there so we don't overlook them. He's talking about more in control. Now that's your job description. That's what it says kind of, in the manual. And you could see that on Saipan Atinian, which he'll talk about. Another thing that strikes me is you want to fire that weapon, come up. If you don't want, stay back there. That's also consistent in what we see in Fox Company during the war. It's not like he was kicking the guy in the rear end, making him get up on the line. It's just different. It's just very interesting to me. You will hear that kind of language from Sam in many cases, including when he's talking with the replacements on the Iwo Jima. So that's standard, right? And then comes the next audio file.
What's interesting about that too is he understands.
Make sure. Okay, we're good.
He understands how valuable the BAR is in the scheme of fire, and he doesn't yell at him. The Marine in question, he basically says, in not so many words, that's a valuable weapon in his mind, and I need it where, one, you're not going to hit other Marines with your fire, and two, if you're forward, you'll be able to place effective fire on the enemy. Like that, he knows that, but he uses a different technique to get that message to the Marine in question, which is a very interesting approach.
So he does, and let's talk about that just for a second. He's talking about on Saipan. What I hear from him on Iwo Jima, when he's talking about some of the guys at night, he would go crawl to their foxholes and check on them and look them in the eye and see how they're doing, and maybe they're not feeling well and need to go back. What he's saying, are they, cracking up a little bit or being unsettled? He recognizes that impact, the human element of that's why he's, I think, saying, if you need to stay back, but you're not firing a weapon if you do that, I think we see it again on Saipan later when they're mopping up, and it's a brutal, disgusting, heartbreaking operation for these guys in northern Saipan, because now they are having to clear out rocks in caves, and civilians women and children are in there with the Japanese, and they can't get them separated. And later he says, we were clearing this out, and women and children, he said, that's enough. He said, the guys, that's enough. We're not doing any more today. And he turned them away and didn't do any more of that, which I've always just found fascinating. But that's Sam, that's his leadership. So he just recognizes the human element of things. And if this guy's not doing well at this moment, then he does not need to be up on the line. Let's go back. I think when I, in hindsight, go through his dialogue, it's what I hear him saying to me.
And again, it's all about him knowing his Marines,
yes,
and understanding their capabilities and their limitations as well. And a key tenet of leadership in there, knowing the people you're leading.
Let's try the next slide. So
Okay.
we just talked about the platoon sergeant.
Iwo Jima brought a special set of difficulties, perhaps, to get that job done. You had to behave differently because of the terrain, or is that true? No, that is true. I mean, we didn't have the flat spaces. I didn't have a squad running through a cornfield, advancing. This was 2, 3, maximum 4 people. From our own experience, we tried to protect, say, a flamethrower, a demolition man. We looked out for them and tried to get set in their place and give them a certain amount of cover for them to do their job. That we did. And I wouldn't know really what a small team, 2 or 3 persons or to my right would be doing. My concentration was to get to that airfield. And those that were in my immediate area, maybe 5 steps to the left, maybe 5 to the right, or those directly ahead to get up that hill and that slope. And I finally did and got to the lip.
Now, let me preface also, Sam would throw out an example in the conversation. And so that at that moment, he says, for example, going to get into the airfield. He may actually talk about that in one of these audio files. But he says, there was nothing in that advance that held the Marines together. And that night you had guys all night trying to find where's Fox Company, Easy Company, their other battalion. He said, but there was nothing that held the advance. He said, we didn't have that in the other operations. So he's talking about, and what he's really articulating there, my job was to get to that objective and know that others are driving forward. He said, I wouldn't know. And so he's applying that anywhere on the island, but he just happens to throw the airfield there on D-Day.
Also interesting to see, he noted, knowing that his Marines that were flamethrower operators and demolition men were specialists and that they needed, in order for the team to operate properly in taking out a fixed fortification, he needed to safeguard those men to put them in the position for success. So he and the other Marines knew, I say, pick up our rate of fire to ensure that they can get to the target. Just again, we sit here and talk about this in the theoretics, but these guys were doing it and probably doing it instinctively or intuitively, but also based on their experiences previously. So just amazing to hear him articulating something that we would think would be common sense. But again, no formal leadership school. These guys were learning this stuff the hard way on a 2-way range.
Exactly. And it's easy to overlook, just as you're saying. It's easy to overlook all the underlying things he's saying. It was very difficult to support a demolition guy or flamethrower in much of that terrain on Iwo Jima. It took a lot of work and a lot of effort. And you only had, let's say, Eldon Pilati, who in the 2nd platoon, that's their demolition guy. And, I put in the book, Kavanaugh said at one point they were looking at this opening, firing port of a bunker or something over to the pillbox over to the left. It had been quiet. And they wanted Pilati to go through another satchel charge in there. And he thought it over and decided against it because he wasn't going to do it on his own. This was not something you just, hey, let's just run over and throw one in there. It was, they'd done assault training on fortified positions. They'd spent a lot of time on that on Maui, and they're gaining a lot of experience on Iwo Jima at that. It's not just something you just go toss a satchel charge into. So yes, we're going to support a flamethrower guy and demolition guy, and that's our mission. But I wouldn't know what guys on my left or right are doing. I've got other Marines who said the only thing I could see was the heel of a boot of my buddy over there. When it moved, I knew it was time to move out. So let me preface this also before I get to this last audio file. I asked Sam, in that terrain, how did you control a unit? And he says, you didn't control a unit. You couldn't. There was no such thing on Iwo Jima. I said, well, if you couldn't see them, how'd you get the Marines to move forward? He said, you didn't have to get the Marines to move forward. They moved forward on their own. Well, wait a minute. Well then what's your job, right? Well, you're supposed to be the boss in charge, right? This is what we're getting into. And he talks about Saipan. You could see what was going on. You could see your entire unit, and maybe even a platoon could react. He said Iwo Jima was not a matter of control. It was a matter of everybody knew where they had to go. Well, that's the coordination part. The other part, what's the second part a team requires? The resolve to move on their own when they can't see anybody else, and in the absence of the leader. What in the world is going on here? Well, that's what we're getting into, and the leadership element. Before I hit the next slide, Joe, you got anything you want to say there?
Yeah, I mean, to me, that's as you hit upon, it's all about knowing your objective. So communication, effective communication across your unit, so they all know what the objective is, and they know that their job is to drive onto that objective. Now, I think the difficulties here is first, somebody like Sam is controlling any supporting arms you might have, because if you can't really see where your troops are, it's very tough to put, say, artillery or mortars on something unless somebody comes back and tells you, or you have a forward observer team that's up there that can direct that fire for you. So very difficult for Sam and other platoon level leaders to support their Marines going forward. But really the amazing part of this, and I think there's a thread if you read about Iwo from any Marine unit that was involved in it, literally the Marines would not stop advancing until they were essentially, those fire teams were combat ineffective. And that is I think is pretty amazing when you think about that. When you talk about their fortitude, essentially they get whittled down to 1 or 2 men in a fire team out of a 4-man team, and they know they can't support each other moving forward much farther than that. And literally that's your limit of advance at that point. And if you can't pivot forces to take over for the ones that have been whittled down because you don't have anybody else, that stops the attack in its tracks. Not because they didn't want to get to the objective, they didn't have the intestinal fortitude or whatever we're going to call it, your courage, chutzpah, whatever we're going to call it. But if you don't have the men to carry through the attack, you have to stop. And I think that was probably the only thing that, in a lot of cases, stopped Marines on the attack in Iwo.
And you mentioned supporting fire, which I'm so glad that you did. And once they get into this terrain in northern Iwo Jima, nothing can get really to them. The 81s, the commander of the 81 millimeter mortar platoon, Buck Finney, said they were just ineffective. he just laid it out, and you couldn't get really any air support. Had to they dropped napalm and things of that nature into the rocks ahead of them, that kind of stuff. But it was just worming your way through a series of ambushes and mousetraps. And
yeah, it was rifle against rifle.
It really is, and it's terrible. Talk about the test of nerve and holding things together. And also, we're talking about northern Iwo Jima. The 4th Marine Division entered that phase of the battle at 45% combat efficiency. And they've taken on roughly that percentage of replacements. Brand new Marines straight out of the United States have never trained with or met these guys before. So all that time in Maui and in combat before this, and the NCOs who are remaining, you've spent this time building over time that coordination and building that resolve, which takes time. It's person to person very much, and building the muscle memory so that team entity now exists, that team state. And you get into northern Iwo Jima, and now you've lost a bunch of those guys, and you've tossed in a bunch of individuals who are only nominally trained in the midst of that. So that team state got its bleeding energy everywhere. And that's so taking this big dump.
Yeah, that again, a huge leadership challenge there. I remember reading in your book, and not your book alone, I've read this before, to receive replacements mid-battle and then become casualty so fast you didn't even have a chance to learn their names. I mean, this is how fast guys are coming in and out of this fight.
Very much. And from Sam's point of view, or your corporals, the reason we're losing so many corporals, now they have to act more as mother hens and be up and moving when they shouldn't be, trying to look after these guys and keep them alive, and telling them well, you stay here until I come tell you to move somewhere else. I've had sergeants tell me that. Don't move until I come get you. Until you're going to lose your NCOs big time, having to do this kind of thing.
Yeah, it's like your account of Bill Wyckoff getting wounded, and this Leroy Surface, his corporal.
Leroy Surface, yeah.
Leroy comes to get him, and one of the last things that Bill says to him on his way out was, "Take care of the men." Like, it wasn't, "Hey, take that attack in." It wasn't, some flowery speech. It was just, "Take care of the men." I mean, to me, that's the essence of NCO leadership, because if you take care of them, they will perform.
Absolutely.
So it's interlinked. So yeah, just
very much. Jack Sims was one of the replacements. He ended up in the machine gun squad, machine gun section, but he was operating in the realm of Haddad the whole time that he was there. And Jack later on was the Boston bureau chief for the Associated Press and scooped the confession of the Boston Strangler. And in 1974 was brought back down to his home school in Alabama and asked to form and head the Department of Journalism at Auburn University, which he did until he retired. That's Jack Sims. Jack said, Haddad would come around and bullets are flying around just like everybody. You're cowering in a hole and there he's standing there. And he said, he had to be scared like all the rest of us, but you never had any sense of it. And what would he do but say something like, "Oh, you guys have got a nice field of fire from here." But all of them said he had that wonderful voice and it never rose beyond the level that you hear, at conversational level. Now he gets all these replacements, and what does he do? He has to crawl around on his hands and knees and look after them in the evening time. And the counterattack rolls right through his platoon, right at his platoon, the final night on the line, and they hold. But he said, "I was scared as all shit." Yeah. Nobody else knew that, but he was, just like everybody else, and it's the way he communicated to everybody else. So let's see what he's got to say, Joe, in this last audio version here.
I never moved a squad, whether another sergeant did or another lieutenant with his outfit moved the squad. I don't know. I never did. We moved out, and with the exception of trying to fill a gap, I was taking the company there, and we filed, single file. We were crossing a minefield, and but that's the only time where I had a fairly large unit. But the unit would be together in their foxholes until jump off time in the morning. And we would jump off, let's move out. But it seemed that the moment you moved out, the clusters would start forming, 2s and 3s and 4s, and sometimes buddies, comrades would get together, 2, 3, 4 in a bunch. And if you made it, if a group of 4 made it, they would probably lose 1, 3 made it, something like that. But first day we had 80 casualties, minimum. And the battle for 382, we lost over 100 men. Casualties. We attacked every morning.
Now, I should follow him up there. When he says the battle for 382, they're talking about 382 and everything northward. To them, it was all the same. So he's talking about those attacks in the morning there. But he's, again, describing the terrain. So control wasn't going to get it done. And something else is at play there. We would today call it mission command, or being a mission-oriented organization, using commander's intent and desired end state. And what he did every night, and especially with his replacements, he said, with these replacements, you had to do more than you normally would. But he said, every night when we were digging in, we'd selected our ground. He said, I would crawl on my hands and knees to each of their holes. And he said, you had to look these fellows in the eyes and see how they're doing and see how they're feeling. And maybe they're not feeling well, need to go back. And then you would discuss what the plan is for tomorrow morning. And you would discuss tonight, especially the night they knew the counterattack was coming. They had intel that said that. Tonight, nobody gets out of their holes. Everybody stays in their hole. Anybody above ground is the enemy. You'll get killed. Stay in your hole. We're all here. And they all did, including the replacements. He said, you know, you would think maybe some of the replacements would have gotten up and run, but they didn't. They stayed and did a good job. But we know why. He came and looked them in the eye, reassured them that they were not alone, and then told them what the plan was. And so what you're seeing there in hindsight with the model of leadership, right, is the first thing was personal leadership. You and I are here together. It's Pete Bonavage and the beer. You know, this is a personal thing. I get it. I know what he's doing, and I love it. You know, if I'm one of the NCOs, I see what he's getting to know us all, and what a great way to do it. I like this guy. You know, whatever. It's a personal thing, personal leadership first, and then he's building that resolve. He's having to do it on the fly. You know, the Marine Corps threw all these replacements in there. They didn't have a different plan in that. They just took a massive dump on these NCOs. And it was up to them in the heat of battle on Iwo Jima and the worst of the terrain they've ever experienced to figure it out and make it work and build that team state every day, every night, and every minute. So that's why these guys referred to him as the gentle giant. And you may have heard, Joe, the audio that I play from one of our corpsmen, Danny B. Thomas, who came to Iwo Jima. He came to Fox Company after Doc Bankham was finally evacuated. They didn't have any other corpsmen up there. But you talk about Haddad, and I've got a recording of Danny saying in tears, he says, Sam Haddad, he said, that man to me is a deity. He said, I think there are fellows who follow him into hell without any prospect of getting back.
With gasoline britches on.
Yeah, that's it. And
You know,
what I'm talking about, we're talking about resolve, and that you talk about not wanting to let somebody down, and also trusting that somebody's not going to tell you to go do something stupid.
Yeah, I think, you know, once a leader has proven, we talked about this a bit when we were talking about Chuck Tatum in Barcelona and how he didn't want to disappoint Bazzi over time. I think just to reference, I talked about R.V. Bergen earlier on in the episode. And one of the things that really struck him about his leadership that affected him going forward was when they got a lieutenant, and Val told me that guy wasn't worth a lick. He wouldn't listen to anybody, and he would do things that were kind of setting everybody off, and blaming other people for his own mistakes. And they finally, Johnny Marmot, who was the platoon sergeant for weapons platoon, came to them and said, what's going on? There's something going on here. Like Marmot could feel what was going on. He could see what was going on with his platoon, and he knew this was going to affect them going into combat. And he went to them, and basically as a group, they got together. He pulled all the NCOs together, and then he pulled all the Marines together, which is interesting because usually as a staff NCO, you filter what the Marines and corpsmen are feeling through your NCOs. But sometimes you might not get the broadest observation of what's going on, or the broadest inputs. So you pull everybody in. This is not to give everybody a vote and say, hey, if you don't feel like doing this, everybody get together and we'll vote, because that's not how it works. But what it does is, like we talked about earlier with Pete with the beer story, is you get a feel for what everybody's thinking, and then you can assess it properly and then make the proper decision as a leader. Like, do I need to go and talk to leaders above the lieutenant to say there's an issue here? But that was something that struck Harvey really. It was Johnny's ability to feel what was going on in his own platoon and then deal with it. And I think he took that as part of his own personal arsenal of leadership as he advanced through the NCO ranks. And he was very proud to be put in charge of like a mortar section RV. To him, that was his leaders recognizing the fact that he was very capable. He knew his weapon systems. He knew how to lead the Marines around him and run his gun. They gave him a section of more. And then finally, when he became a sergeant. So all this built, but he was imbued with these observations of other leaderships that he respected. And I think we can draw a line through that to Sam and how the Marines felt about him as well, in that they observe his personal leadership, and that not only do they feel the I'll go to attack hell with gasoline britches on concept, but also just I'm going to take some of that as an example of how I am going to perform if I'm putting that in that position. And I think there's definitely a line through that as Marines advance in their career and they see a leader they respect, who's capable and knows how to do his job, knows the weapon systems and how to employ it, and then knows his Marines and corpsmen and how to utilize them to his best ability to get the most out of them towards accomplishing the mission. And I think that we've seen that, like all these little examples as you've laid out and I've tried to lay out, through the Marine Corps and through its performance during World War II. This is not to say, listen, it's not a blanket statement, and I know you'll agree that every NCO performed fantastically, and there were plenty of cowards in uniform. There are always exceptions to the rule, but I think by and large, the model worked during World War II the way it was intended. And that NCOs really were, as to bring it full circle, as we talked about in the opening, they are the element that makes everything go. Like we as staff NCOs, like myself, when I was a staff sergeant and I was a gunny, I was like, no, we make the Marine Corps go. No, we make the NCOs, we empower the NCOs to make the Marine Corps go. But it's them, it's the 2 and 3 stripers that really are out there doing the hard stuff and taking the things that we're told from officers and given to us as staff NCOs and given to them. They're the ones that make it happen. And that's what happened exceptionally well during World War II with the Marine Corps.
I would concur. I would just from a empirical or generic leadership standpoint, when folks are treated with dignity and respect, including these Marines, they're reminded of just what they can bring to the fight. I think Sam recognized that, and that's the resolve element of things. I don't care what you bring to the battlefield. If we got resolve, I'll take you on, and we'll take you down. Especially if you're coming to battle with compliance, and I've got resolve. Good luck to you. My boys are going to take you because they want to. They don't have to. They want to. General Snowden talked about motivation being very important. Said the Japanese, and it was very important to recognize that they had taken the oath and they were fighting and willing to die for the emperor to whom they'd made the oath. Said my Marines wanted to get this job done and go home to their girlfriends. That's a difference. That's compliance versus resolve there. But and then also, it's not 100%. You don't ever achieve 100% with this kind of stuff. Not everybody is capable of it. But if you want to say high performance teams this is what we see in them, or if you want to say why were we successful in Northern Iwo Jima? This is why. And these are the guys that were holding it together. There's one more thing, Joe, to tell you on that.
Surely were, but I was almost going to just read verbatim General Snowden's comments about young corporals and sergeants, but I'm not going to steal the thunder from the book. It really is worth it to see, especially somebody who eventually becomes the assistant commandant of the Marine Corps, lessons he learned rooted in World War II experience, carried with him through his career. But yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go right ahead.
Not a bit. There's another example. Fox Company's first sergeant through most of the war. I think I've got it queued up here. Let me just pull it. Yeah. And their company commander, Jack Padley. Now, this photograph is taken on Saipan. This is the 2nd of July when the battalion is moving inland on Saipan. And that's the company commander, Jack Padley, walking out of the picture to the left. And the company exec, Bill Hayes, is standing there with his hands on his hips, as he always did when there was a camera around. He's got his big Navy jacket on that he brought back ashore after essentially jumping ship after he'd been wounded. So he's got it crammed full of stuff. And Charlie Haynes back there carrying the SCR 300. But Jack Padley, walking out of the picture, he didn't have time for photographs. He was that way in college when he was a football star. Several of the correspondents and writers said, it was never a great interview. It was a whole bunch of yups, yes, sir, no, sir, and this kind of thing. that found its way into the company as well. Now, here's the reason I'm showing this picture really. If you can see closely and look at Padley, look at Hayes, look at Haynes, all of them growing a beard. Prior to this event, Sergeant Leo Kelly had come down through company headquarters, and the water situation on Saipan was pathetic. The division advanced up the East Coast, and logistics was a nightmare trying to keep water up to them, what there was. Additionally, for example, the regiment had already loaded out for Saipan and got orders to unload what it had, about 25% of its gear, to make room for Corps level stuff. So they had to leave many Jeeps behind. The 2nd Battalion only had one of its cargo Jeeps up there. It's tough to get water to the troops now on Saipan. And Sergeant Leo Kelly comes to company headquarters one day and sees the first sergeant, Jim Hudson, shaving out of his helmet, and let him have it. You no good SOB. My Marines don't have enough water to drink, but you got enough water to shave with? Now look at the officers. There's no more shaving. These guys, it was all about winning, victory,
Mission
getting the job
accomplishment.
done. And if Leo Kelly brought it to the fore, then by God, they all listened to it, you know. This is Jack Padley's company. This is the reality, I think, in this total wartime setting, in the leadership, self-correcting itself, you know, through the organization, and the focus on the troops and what you're communicating to the troops. Even if there is it doesn't take much water to shave, but by God, it doesn't take much water, you know, to make Marines, you know, suffer in combat either.
Yep.
So anyway, it all had to do with what are we communicating to the guys who actually have to get the job done? And I think that's what we're really hammering away here.
Yeah, I have an interesting story about shaving from a different angle. In Iraq, obviously, we had much stronger logistics and the ability to push supplies up to us, and it was funny. One day early in the campaign, I was shaving. I had gotten up after stand 2, and I went over to the vehicle. I shaving in cold water. You just, you know, clean your face up, and the expectation is always the Marine Corps standard is you'll shave every day if the water is available. But my guys were always like, Staff Sergeant, you always shave every day. He goes, what? They're like, why? Like, we can go a day or two without shaving, can't we? And I said, yeah, you know, it is the Marine Corps standard, but I will tell you this, it makes me feel like a human being every day, just to do one normal thing, like shave and brush my teeth. And I said, I don't want to stop feeling that way. I want to feel like I'm a normal human being at times where I can do these things. And every one of them, without complaint, shaved every day for the rest of the campaign. Not because it was the Marine Corps standard, but because they did grasp the concept of it makes me feel like a normal human being and not an animal. And so whereas Leo was coming at it from a different angle because there was a lack of water supplies, I used that to instill discipline in my Marines. Even though they didn't realize they were getting a discipline lesson, they were getting a lesson in feel human, but it was also a discipline lesson that probably flew over a couple of their heads. But at the end of the day, you need those things too to make you feel normal. But I felt like that was just a good lesson for them. And sometimes leaders have to know how to manipulate your troops without them knowing you're manipulating them.
Yeah. So I always hammer away at the word manipulating, influencing.
Manipulating has a negative connotation, but that's essentially what you're doing.
Nobody, you manipulate me and think that I'm going to respect you. You know, no. But now influence and leading by example. Okay. You know, Dick Winter's shaving with ice water, you know, et cetera. I get it. It's laughable, but I get what he's doing. And it would have the proper effect on me if I saw what he was doing, right? The desired effect. So, and you're hammering away at the reminder that we're human, which is very powerful, apparently in combat. I've never been there in combat, but that is accountability to each other is what holds it all together and what drives it forward. That's the resolve. That's a human thing, purely human thing. Nothing else does that.
And I think the humanity of men like Sam really was another example of what made them effective leaders at the end of the day. I mean, we touched on all these other things, right? Mastery of weapon systems, understanding of terrain. But at the end of the day, it's the humanity of the individual that also makes them an effective leader.
It is. Joe, do you want to play? Do you want to see the video of Snowden talking about the Marines and the NCOs?
Yeah, without a doubt. And then I think because we're running on close to like 2 hours, which is fantastic
always.
to me. This is like catnip, for a Marine, a retired Marine gunny. But yeah, let's definitely listen to the general, and then we'll kind of we'll start to wind it down. People are gonna have to watch this or two or three bits.
Two sittings.
But go right ahead. Let's run the general because this is a great quote.
All right, so let me just have to switch over to PowerPoint to make this one work. So we'll just do that.
Those young Marines, despite the casualties we suffered today, they knew that tomorrow we're going to do the same thing all over again. When the sun went down, we tried to count what our casualties were and who was left. And what do we need to carry on tomorrow? They knew what was going to happen tomorrow. They're going to continue to butt their heads against that stone wall of resolve on the Japanese side. But they did it anyway. They didn't hesitate. They knew that's what they were there for. They knew what the objectives were. And they fought in terms of let's gain the objective and get out of here. And another side effect of that was that we tried to instill in the troops, the attitude was, if your leader goes down, step in and take the responsibility for leadership. Don't wait for somebody else to come. Do what's got to be done. Step in and fill the shoes of that lost leader you had. And Marines did that. We ended up with corporals commanding platoons. We ended up with sergeants sometimes commanding companies. That's because the servant leadership concept mixed with the desire to gain the objective and required teamwork and somebody to lead it, that all fitted together. One, to make effective battlefield tactics. Second, to ensure that we kept our eye on the objective. And third, working together. Regardless who the leader is, we work together under that leadership to do what's got to be done. That's what paid off on Iwo Jima.
Perfect. Perfect way to nail it down. The general just captured everything.
Indeed. Yeah, indeed.
Well, Steve, this has been fantastic. I love talking about Marines and combat and all the amazing things that they've accomplished. And I know we stovepiped it a little bit and talking only about a couple different units, but I think these are good exemplars of what you could see across the breadth and width of not only the Marine Corps, but the U.S. Army during World War II as well, because they began to embrace that small unit leadership and the next man up concept in terms of leadership. And I think folks are going to get a lot out of this thing, this particular pod. I do want to say there may be a little hiccup in episode release, not for this one, but coming ones with the advent of the holiday season here in the States, as we call it, the American Ramadan's coming. So we'll be stepping back, and it might skip one, but I don't know. I might just record some hip pocket stuff and get it out there to close the gap. We got some great new stuff coming up after the new year, and I won't bore you with it here. There'll be a newsletter coming out for our Patreon subscribers. For Steve, if you want to contact him, I'll get the link for Trident Leadership. He does tours, he does consults, he does seminars. You really can't go wrong if you bring Steve on to talk to your folks, whether you're a consumer, you're a company, or you're a military organization. He will come armed to bear with outstanding examples of leadership to help get your unit or your organization on track. I've spent a lot of time with him talking via Zoom, and I'm very impressed with everything he brings to the table with regards to that. But Steve, again, thanks for coming on and talking about these fantastic Marines and sailors.
Thanks, Joe. It's a privilege.
Yeah, I could do this all day, and I know you feel the same way. Maybe we'll do another one next time. You tell me what you want to talk about instead of me pitching one to you.
Good after Doc Bankin next time, maybe, huh?
Oh yeah, let's do that. Let's do Devil Docs next time.
There we
All
go.
right. That sounds like a
Good to
win.
go.
All right, Steve, thanks. I mean, I really
Thanks,
appreciate
Joe.
you burning up the morning, Sunday morning here with me.
Outstanding. Love it.
All right. Take care, everyone.